Yeah, hello. We are back at day two of ConWorxx, and I'm having, let's say, it is my honor to welcome the best reviewer in the tabletop industry, the master of words, who has a wonderful sense of humor and who is also a very dangerous opponent at the virtual gaming table. Welcome to the Space Biff himself, to Mr. Dan Thurot. Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Uli?
Well as well, but now somewhat tired of the because of the long day. But it's my pleasure. I'm having so many interesting guests, and we talked a little bit earlier. And here at the ConWorks, even my guests have to do most of the work, so it's it's way easier here. And for me, and maybe you remember from the last time we were talking at the Spielworks, it's a weekly Spielworks chat, because you may remember Biff. He's
Hello,
not the
Biff.
space Biff, but he's the Biff. So that's really his name, and he's always happy when he knows that you are my guest. So
Oh,
he's
good.
a huge fan of you. But what are we doing in the next 30 minutes, Dan? Are we doing anything or?
We discussed a topic that I thought would be nice and easy, um, but actually I shouldn't have agreed to it because it's so hard. Uli, this is the hardest topic for me. Is we were going to discuss our three favorite games of the year.
Oh, is it really of the year? So I wasn't sure about this anymore. So, well, now this is even more difficult. And now I thought our three favorite games. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit in
Well,
a
that's
second.
that's fine too. I went with the year because that was a little easier. If you were to ask me my three favorite games of all time, I don't think I could pick any. Um, that's impossible.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky, but I'm really curious then what your favorite three games of the year are. And Dan, if you like, please start with one of the games.
Okay, well, I'll start with my number three, and these have a unifying theme, Uli. Um, so these games, I've noticed this was not intentional, but I've noticed that these are all unified a little bit by they all kind of upend my expectations of what a board game can do.
Mhm.
So maybe this is just that kind of year where I was looking for things to change
Mhm.
definitions.
Mhm.
So the first one, so my number three game of the year so far, was Ryan Lockett's Sleeping Gods.
Okay, okay. So I'm always interested in why. So why Dan, of course.
Well, so do you know Ryan?
I've never talked to him, but I think he was your guest at one of your podcasts. Is this true?
Yes.
So yeah, I listened to that episode, so I have a general idea
Yeah.
there. Yes.
And and that was a lot of fun because he actually was able to come over in person. We only live a few miles apart, actually. It was one of the few times I've been able to see a person face to face that I've done an interview. What I love about this game is Ryan has always been very inventive. So he does a lot of different things. He designs his games, he illustrates his games, and he writes his games. He often has narrative-based games. Well, for this game, Sleeping Gods, he did all of those, but he also wanted to break out a little bit. So what he did was he pitched it to me originally as Skyrim as a board game. So this idea that you can go anywhere and do anything. If you see something cool in the distance, you can go do it. And I was pretty hesitant because I usually don't like adventure board games all that much. You end up reading a lot of text, they're kind of boring. Um, but what he did was just so perfectly actualized. So you have this big map, and the map is broken. It's a spiral bound notebook. So you open it up, and here's a big map, and you can travel off any edge of that map, and you turn to a different page, and there's where you went.
That's clever.
And 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 so it's big, this world, and you really can go in any direction. And you end up going on, you go to, let's say you go to a trading town or a fishing town, and you meet people and they give you quests. And as you play, You pick up new keywords so that when you flip over to the storybook, it'll say, if you have the word net, you look up a different part of this story.
Mm.
And which, of course, we've seen before. It's kind of a choose your own adventure
Mm.
feel.
Yes.
Um, but the way that he brings it all together is really just wonderful,
Mm.
and it creates this very diverse feeling adventure where your crew is full of interesting personalities, and you meet interesting personalities, and it all coheres as one big storyline.
Mm.
And I've played through this campaign 3 times now, and every time it's been completely different,
This is.
and it just feels great.
Mm.
And so I've loved spending time in the world that he's created.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things that was a little controversial, Uli, is that there's a time limit. You can only take so many turns before the end of the game.
Why is this controversial to interrupt?
You know,
Does it put too much pressure? Doesn't feel it not in line with your game experience, or what is the reason? And another question I'm having here, because I didn't notice it probably, is it a solitaire game or can more players enjoy it? And how is this handled
yeah.
if you're moving off the pages of the book?
So the way it works is you're on the ocean, and so everyone is on the same ship.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a cooperative game,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be 1 to 4 players. But you'll never split up. So even though you're in control of different characters, you're always together as one big party. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how it handles that. Um, as for the time limit, I think when he pitched this Skyrim meets a board game, one of the defining characteristics of an open world game like Skyrim is that there's no time limit. You
Yeah.
could play for 300 hours, right? Um, and he found very quickly, apparently, that did not work in a board game format. So even with a long campaign game, there needed to be some pressure. Otherwise, you were always doing boring things. You
Mm-hmm.
go out and you get a little bit hurt, so you go back to port and rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so to keep you from doing that, he had to make it that you don't have enough time. So you're always debating, well, can we survive one more encounter, or do we need to go home and rest? What how far can we push ourselves before resting? And that ends up being one of the most interesting dynamics in the game is, can we go out and explore these places and then keep exploring? You don't want to go back home. And it actually does create kind of this, like mountain men, right? These mountain men didn't want to walk out and trap a few furs and then walk home. They wanted to walk out and trap thousands of furs before winter and then go home. And it kind of creates that rhythm where you have limited time. So absolutely wonderful game, one of my favorites. Uli, what's your number 3?
Yeah, first, thank you very much. So, this was a very interesting description because, and I've actually written down the title Sleeping Gods by Ryan Lockett. And is this game final, before I get to my number 3, is this game readily available at this moment, or is it sold out, or yeah.
When I reviewed it and when I was talking to Ryan, it was sold out because of shipping trouble. So there were games, but they were not for sale yet. So I'm not sure if that has resolved or not.
Okay, but I'll check this up. So wonderful. And I have to briefly look into the chat here because my good friend Andre is having an important message for me because my favorite hockey team who played this evening, they won 2-0 against the leading team of the table, against bloody Adler Mannheim. So thank you for this message, and now I'm even I'd love to continue here in a good mood. So my number 3 game is, and you know this, and it's not necessarily 3-2-1, but I picked one typical, although it's not really typical Euro type game. So I picked this title here, Cryo by
Oh,
Z-Man
yeah.
Games, and actually. The first time I heard about the game was via
Oh, okay.
your website, and you described it in a great way. So I said, well, let's give this game a try. I have to say, graphically, some people like it a lot. It doesn't do anything for me. Yeah,
Mm.
but what I like, and this is the reason why I think it's a wonderful Eurotype, is that it has such a great focus. Some people may know that in recent years, in a lot of typical Eurotype games, you are getting rewarded for each and everything you are doing. So you move to the
Right.
left, you get 3 points. You move to the right, 4 points. You move backwards, 2 points for you. And in the end, we have one huge scoring, and then you have 170 points. I have 163 points, and the end scoring is very complex and done. Yeah, and some people, of course, enjoy this type of game. It's a different kind of challenge. But here, in my opinion, at least in Cryo, you have one clear goal. You have to bring your people into the caves so that they can survive. And most of the points you earn by doing this. But the mechanics, of course, are also nice, and you have cards which function in various ways. But the rules are for a game of not its complexity, but for the amount of decision making you're doing in this game are surprisingly short and brief. So I think design wise, it's a great achievement to do such a game in the Eurotype market. It's also going a little bit against the trend, and more power for companies who are able to bring out such a game. So I was really surprised. I don't care for the graphics. I don't care for the plastic stuff in there. Yeah, Z-Man owned by Asmodee, probably they have had a stash of old plastic miniature somewhere in the corner, and let's put it in there. It doesn't hurt, but
Right.
that's what it is. What do you? Of course, I know that you like the game, but what do you think? What are the strengths of Cryo?
I think you've hit the main thing, right? That I love that everything comes down to that action and that it's a hard action, right? It's expensive and you have to prepare for it. Um, and it still doesn't feel like too much of a bottleneck.
Yeah.
It's everything comes toward that action, but it's an opportunity, not just a thing you're required to do.
Mm.
And you can really turn the game around by pulling off two or three really good settlement actions.
Yes.
Um, and I love that about Cryo.
Yes.
It's a smart game.
A really smart game. So I was really impressed by it. And here's hello Pete, by the way, in the chat, and he's saying hello, of course, to you as well.
Oh, hello, Pete.
And he's saying that Sleeping Gods will be published in German language by Schwerkraft Verlag. So
Oh,
German language players, Schwerkraft Verlag will bring the German edition of this one. So this
great.
is good news. Thank you, Pete, for this type of information. So now, number two, Dan. What is
Okay,
your number two?
my number two. I feel a little bad that this is my number two and not number one. This is Cole Worley's Oath.
Wow, great game. Yes.
Yeah, I love Oath. Have you played Oath, Uli?
Yes, I have. And may I interrupt you for a second
Of
here?
course.
Um, I announced this yesterday, and Spielworks will do the German edition of Oath.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
yeah, I'm really proud, and I really like the game very much. But I'm curious what you think about the game. Even more, even more.
I love it. I think it's great. Um, you know, so you know, Uli, that I work as a historian, right? And this game is one of the few games, there's many games about history. There's many games that take place in history. This game is about historiography, the practice of history, and the practice of looking at history as this thing that can be defined, sure, by the winners, but it can also be defined in other ways. And when players really get into that mindset, I think Oath is just magical. When you're sitting at the table and you're saying, okay, I'm going to lose, but I'm going to try to lose in such a way that it sets me up for the next game, which is really how we think as people. You look at history, at dynastic empires and such. You look at a family that ends up becoming emperors. And yeah, sometimes they say, well, we have to cut our losses, but we want to remain in
Yes.
power. We don't want to get executed. So we're going to play along with this
Mm.
other family that's rising to the dynasty. And Oath does that,
Yes.
which I think is just, it requires multiple plays. It requires a consistent group. It does have requirements.
Yes.
But if you get those, I have never played a game quite like it.
Mm.
Um, and the fact that it's not just that gimmick, it's a good game. It's a good political simulation. That's what, for me, just makes it a wonderful experience. So have you played a Uli with a consistent group?
No, actually, I haven't played it enough up to now because of the pandemic. So
Yeah,
yes and no. So the few games I had, they were with a consistent group, and this is absolutely helpful. Although I have to also say that for one player, it wasn't the game. But I think what I really admire, what Cole and Leader games are doing here, is that they are also going against a certain trend in gaming. And here in Germany, many years ago, Max Gold had said, well, people nowadays try to consume as easily as possible, and I don't like it. So consumption has to be as easy as possible, not only in gaming, but in anything. And
yeah,
here, I think, if you want to really enjoy Oath, as you said, multiple plays of the game, and you have to get into this game. So, and for certain people, they don't want this. They want, it's also, we talked about this yesterday and today. It's also some trends coming from video games over to tabletop games. You always need rewards immediately. So in a lot of
yeah,
video games these days, every 10 minutes, even if I'm playing very badly, I get rewards.
right.
I'm promoted for whatever. And oaths can hurt you. So that's what it is. But in my
Yeah.
opinion, this is a major plus, and it sets it apart from all the rest. Do we need more of the same games? No, we need an O's here. So that's my opinion here. So
Yeah.
great pick. Yeah.
Well, and to you as well. Good pick for something to do the German publication for.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So, shall I come to my number two here?
Please do.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's see. And so I had this Euro type game, and now I'm having a war game. So I'm picking this one here,
Ooh,
Verdun
okay.
1916, Steel Inferno. It's by a French publisher, Fellowship of Simulations, but there is an English edition for Stupid
Okay.
Uli available because I'm not speaking any French. What is really great in this game, you may see this from the illustration here at the bottom, is that all the illustrations, or most of the illustrations in the game, especially of all the cards, it's a card-driven game about the Verdun offensive, but it's a full year, and you can do other things. So the Germans do not have to attack at the same spot, but it makes sense to do so. And the art is by Tardy, who is a French graphics novel illustrator. So he did in France, and he's famous in France, he did graphic novels on World War One, several ones. And they were allowed, with the permission of the publisher of the graphic novels, to use the art in the game. So it's really grim. It's really black and white, often, and grim art. And this gives a unique flavor to this game, because Verdun 1916, as you know, is one of the most brutal battles ever, and
Yeah.
there is no sense actually. Of course, the Germans wanted to attack there for a reason, Falkenhayn. He wanted to attack at that part, but actually there is no reason to start an offensive, and especially after 2 or 3 weeks, the Germans must know, no, we won't make it. But they continued and continued and continued till the counterattacks are coming in, and this all is in this game. It is not without its flaws, but which game it are. So
Yeah.
I like it. I like it a lot, and I can. If you are into historical games, war games, strictly two players, playing time is 5 to 6 hours probably. Then I think it's a great choice. Yeah.
Okay, I wrote that one down. That looks fascinating.
It is really nice. And Daniel, you're a brute here, and not you, Dan. There's Daniel Newman here in the chat. He's saying, "Sorry, I'm late. Can you start this one over?" No, we won't. But Cludius is saying, "Super pick, Uli." So apparently, this game has more love. So you're number one here, Dan. So I'm
Okay,
interested.
my number one game of the year is Mind Management by Jay Cormier and Sen-Foong Lim.
Mm.
And so this is a hidden movement game. It is based on the comic book series by Matt Kindt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the easiest way to describe it would be to start with Matt Kindt. So he illustrated it for them, and his involvement is important to the series, important to the game, because the comic series is about expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about that you don't quite know what's going on. It kind of has this espionage thing. And the game does that too. And I can't say too much for fear of spoiling it. But let's say that, so it's two sides, but it is a team game where one person is traveling around a city to recruit agents. And
Mm-hmm.
the other side is a team of up to four um, investigators who are trying to stop that recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it works. Is that the player who's the recruiter has a
Mm-hmm.
screen and he's moving around in secret, and the others are chasing him. Well, let's say somebody wins. One side wins. The other side gets to open a box, and there are
Uh-huh.
7 boxes for each team. And that box will now add new opportunities and tools and characters for the side that lost. So the game is always bouncing back and forth. So when you lose, it doesn't feel all that bad. You actually get a little reward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and each one of these boxes changes the game so much that after a few plays, it's it really does play with your expectations. And we have played, I think, 11 times,
Wow.
12, something like that, 12 times. No, we've played at least 13 times. And so we only have 2 boxes left to open.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is so crazy compared to what it was at the beginning of the thing that we never would have imagined it could be so different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and more than that, I think this is the best hidden movement game I have ever played.
Wow.
And I love hidden movement games.
Mm-hmm.
But this one really is quite good. So
Mm-hmm.
Mind Management, I don't think has had an easy release. I don't imagine you've played it.
No, I haven't played it at all, but it's on my list for Essen in 2 weeks because
Mm,
it's apparently distributed and available at Essen at Matago. So that's at least
mm.
what I heard. And if it's there, I will definitely buy it. And now, even more that I've heard that it's that good. So fantastic. And you have more people here in the chat. So Daniel Newman is saying, he's very curious about it, and he has a question. Does it play well with two?
The way it works is that the side that's the investigators, you will always have four. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're playing, if it's two, one side is going to be the recruiter, the other side you'll control 4 characters. So I prefer it with more,
Mm-hmm.
but it does work with two.
Okay.
Um, but part of the fun is that you end up with multiple people kind of doing this deduction, puzzle about, oh, I think he went this way, or I think she went this way. And the more people you have thinking about that it gets a little easier, or it gets a little harder because someone introduces a thought, a doubt, and it turns out
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but now everyone has to entertain it. And that can be really interesting, that some of the false noise, the signal, um, that it can come from people on your own team on accident,
Mm-hmm.
which is part of the enjoyment of it.
Interesting, very interesting. And by the way, good to see you, Evan, here. And he's saying it's on the shelf at his local game store in Oregon. So at least in the
Okay.
US, it's available. And Pete is now also interested because of you. He's saying now need to look again at the game. And Chris, of course, he made a comment on Oath. I know it was a joke. And Oath has a wonderful table presence, so no
Yeah.
doubt about it. If you have set it up on the table and look at the pieces, it's wonderful, especially the board. So no worries here. Yeah. So great thing here, Dan. I will try to get the game at Essen. My last choice is, and I said initially that I cheated because it's not a game from this year. Actually, it's a game. It's an Infamous Traffic. So this
Okay.
is
Yeah.
the game that I've played so often during the pandemic, and with often with the same group of people, which in my opinion adds to the enjoyment of the game. And yeah, to me it is near perfection for what I'm looking for in a game. And it's a really wonderful game, and always
Yeah.
different. But uh, difficult for me now in English to describe it, but to reduce is not the right word, but to reduce this part of history. So we have an opium war, maybe, or several opiums war. We have the opium trade. We are British companies coming into China, reducing it. On the other hand, too, I get 1 point for my fancy hat, or zero
Right.
points for a fox hunting accident, is sheer brilliance in my opinion on various levels. And yes, you can, if you look at it very superficially, you could say, well, what's that? What's that? Why is this done? But it makes you really thinking about the topic here. So I really think it's a wonderful game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course you've played the game. Well, what do you think about an Infamous Traffic?
I think in Infamous Traffic, for so many of us, was an eye opener, just that it could portray history in such a piercing way. You mentioned the fancy hat, that you're going to addict tens of thousands of people. You're going to potentially start a war that will kill thousands of people. And what is it for?
Yeah,
It's not for ideology. It's not for religion. It's not for, you can, it's not even for resources. It's not for any good, even, is there any such thing as a good war? This isn't even for anything that anyone has ever tried to use as an argument for a good war. It's just for a bad, rotten war. And what is it for?
yeah,
It's for a hat.
yeah.
And it's just so brilliant in the way that it deconstructs, um, what are these noble wars that the British Empire is fighting? It it's so you can sell more opium.
Yes,
Um, I love an Infamous Traffic. That's a
yes.
good pick.
Yeah, and as I said, I cheated here. So because yeah, I'm so bad picking topics, but I'm glad that we discussed it, because for me it was very valuable as usual to
Yeah.
listen to you, because all three games are wonderful, and probably I'll purchase two of them now. And Sleeping Gods was actually not on my radar necessarily. So wonderful. And here in the chat, Andre is saying, yeah, an Infamous Traffic, he can only second this. He says, oh, I really suck at AEIT. I'd immediately play this again. Yes, indeed. And Claudius is having a question. Any news on a republishing of an Infamous Traffic? Yeah, well, you have to wait another 15 minutes when Drew and Cole are my guests.
Oh,
Main topic will be John Company second edition, but I will definitely ask them about a new edition of an Infamous Traffic. So I think there will be
yeah, you'll
one,
get the
but
scoop.
yeah, of course. No,
Yeah.
we'll see. And Daniel, that brute, is saying, so again, not you here in the chat. Can you recap all the picks for those of who Cuff came in late. No, we won't. We won't. No, we are not doing this. But yes, we are good people, right? So what were your three picks, Dan?
So my three picks were Sleeping Gods, Oath, and Mind Management.
So great picks, and mine were in Infamous Traffic, then Verdun 1916. It's a war game. It's probably nothing for you, Daniel, and then Cryo were my three picks. So that's what it was. And yeah, looking at the time. So one thing is, Dan, I could talk to you for 7 hours. It's always inspiring. It's always wonderful, and
Oh,
but I need to take a quick break for the next
okay. Well,
chapter.
thank you for having me, Uli.
Yeah, it all my pleasure here, and enjoy the rest of your day. You're at 1 p.m. probably
Yep,
at this
1
moment,
p.m.
and enjoy it. And for all the viewers here, thank you for your time too. And within 13 minutes, I'm talking to Drew and Cole. So if you're interested, please join me at that time again. Thanks a
Okay.
lot. Bye bye. Bye.